May dugo pa.
Ganyan lang kakawag ng ano.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Ang nakakuha ko ng 9 pesos sa 45 pieces na kiti-kiti ang nakuha ko. May doon, mali, pambili ko ng kape, malaking tulong sa akin to.
Yung aming pong programa ay may piso sa mosquito, pero hindi po literal na bawat isang mosquito ay piso, malulugi po ang barangay. At least 5 pieces of patay man o buhay, kiti-kiti, kapalit po nun ay piso, 5 piraso. Nung nalaman ko po na medyo mataas ang cases sa barangay ko, and I have 44 cases, and meron po kaming 2 na po na namatay na estudyante. Kaya nung nagkaroon po ng alarma, yung Quezon City na merong outbreak, ang Quezon City, kaya ang Mandaluyong po, lalo tigit ang barangay ko, pinakamalaki, maraming tao. Ako na mismo ang gumawa ng paraan na panibagong alternatibo na makakadagdag sa ongoing projects na ginagawa ng LG.
A family has been torn apart and a community left shattered after a house fire at Heckenberg near Liverpool claimed the life of a mother and her daughter. 46-year-old Veronica Carmody heroically racing back into the flames when she realised 6-year-old Aurora hadn't made it out. A warning, this story is confronting.
A home engulfed in fire on St John's Road. Inside, 5 children and 5 adults. The flames moving so quickly, brave neighbours are forced to become first responders.
I tried to rush through the side to the back door to help whoever was still inside, but we couldn't get through because the flames were too big.
My dad got one of them out, one of the little girls out of the house, so he had to grab a swing and smash one of the windows and help someone get inside to grab the little girl.
It's understood at that moment, 46-year-old mother Veronica Carmody realised her 6-year-old daughter Aurora was still inside the burning home and she rushed back in. They never made it back out.
I don't understand why this little girl or anyone's been taken so soon.
A 2-year-old girl was rushed to Westmead Hospital in a critical condition. 3 other children also made it out. A 50-year-old man transported to Concord Hospital, also critical, and a 14-year-old girl taken to Liverpool Hospital but has since been discharged. 2 other women and a man escaped uninjured.
I feel sad because I don't know what to say. It's heartbreaking. That's a baby, you know.
Today, friends laid floral tributes as fire investigators began combing through the ruins to find answers.
At this stage, it's still too early to be able to say what may have caused the fire.
The scale of the fire forced bits of furniture to explode out a front window, the destruction making it difficult for investigators to find the source of the blaze, which they believe began in a back room.
It's a tragic event. It's a very timely reminder about the importance of smoke alarms in people's homes.
At Heckenberg, Erin Ramsey, 9 News.
Let's go live to Erin Ramsey at Westmead. Erin, you have an update on the toddler.
Pete, a 2-year-old girl is still fighting for life here at the Children's Hospital at Westmead after she was pulled from that burning home by an incredibly brave neighbour. Now tonight, a 50-year-old man believed to be Veronica's partner is also in a critical condition at Concord Hospital as that home remains a crime scene as fire investigators continue to search for what sparked this tragedy. Pete?
Erin, thank you.
This story, as I'm sure you can tell, is about a soda giant, Coca-Cola, the world's biggest beverage maker. But in the past few years, it has received one blow after another thanks to a growing body of research that proves the negative health effects of soda, including high risk of obesity and heart disease. There has been global action to curtail consumption of sugary drinks. Although progress is painfully slow, consumers are increasingly ditching soda. So now Coca-Cola is diversifying. It is ditching carbonation and moving towards cow milk. What does this mean for the company and for soda giants everywhere else? Here's a report.
Coca-Cola is the world's biggest beverage maker thanks to its soft drinks. It is a household name, but over the past few years it has moved away from carbonation and towards cow milk. This is Fairlife. Some of you may have heard of this brand. It launched in 2012 as a joint venture between Coca-Cola and dairy wholesaler Select Milk Producers. In 2020, Coca-Cola fully acquired the company for an initial $980 million. And now, the soda giant is looking at the total payment for the acquisition to be more than $6 billion. That's the hefty sum. This is one of Coca-Cola's priciest acquisitions ever. So what's behind the company's $7 billion bet? Why is it diversifying into the dairy market? It is mainly thanks to a more health-conscious consumer base. Study after study shows that sugary drinks like soda are bad for people's health. They increase the risk of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular conditions, kidney and liver disease, among other problems. Now, consumers are increasingly making healthier choices, and there is a global policy push to curb the consumption of sodas, including higher taxes on sugary drinks. Plus, there is a push for wellness. It is a $1.8 trillion global market, and it includes everything from cold plunges to celery juice. So companies essentially manufacturing sugary drinks are moving towards other avenues like coffee, tea, or milk and giving it a wellness twist. Coca-Cola has raked in big profits with its milky move and sprinked it with wellness because Fairlife draws out lactose and sugar from the milk but doubles the protein. Protein shakes are a $6 billion market, and Coca-Cola is pushing into it. So despite being about 3 times the price of traditional milk in 2022, Fairlife sales surpassed $1 billion. That's 1,000% increase from $90 million in 2015. And now, it is Coca-Cola's fastest growing US brand. But this is not an isolated case. Brands like Pepsi and Dr. Pepper also trying to diversify beyond the sugary drink market. They are pushing into all things water, from regular water to coconut water or the viral black cherry sparkling water. After all, global flavored water market stands at $14 billion. It promises rewards to those who choose to venture in. So whether it is milk or antioxidant-infused water, one thing is clear: soda behemoths are going beyond the bubbles. Only time will tell if their big bet helps them grow past soft drinks.
It is our first large mass stranding of these animals in around 50 years. To try and refloat the animals directly back into that surf would be challenging, and then of course that would also present some enormous safety risks for our staff and personnel. We've got our experts on site now that are doing those assessments and doing all that they can to determine what methodology will be implemented to try and find a suitable and a humane response to this particular very challenging incident.
Brazil's Attorney General has charged Bolsonaro and the others with 3 offences: criminal organisation, an attempted coup, and attempted abolition of the democratic state. These hold a total possible prison time of 28 years. The details, the Attorney General says that over a year before the election, Bolsonaro was already attacking the electoral system as a possible justification to overturn the results, that he was inciting the military to join him in a coup. In fact, the Attorney General says that the only reason that there wasn't a coup was that although the Navy chief agreed with Bolsonaro, the Army and the Air Force chiefs didn't. Bolsonaro is also accused of leading legal teams trying to find a justification for a state of siege to keep him in power, to support the far-right mobs who are outside military barracks calling on the military to take over. And the most extraordinary accusation is of Bolsonaro's involvement in the Operation Green and Yellow Dagger, which was a plan to either kidnap or assassinate through poisoning or shooting Lula, then President-elect, his running mate, and a member of Supreme Court. The Attorney General is saying that a document with this scheme was printed in the presidential building at a time when Bolsonaro was present, and that Bolsonaro not only knew about this plan, but he also agreed with it. So those will be the charges that he will be facing. This comes in a 272-page document from the Attorney General, who is saying there are a lot of documentary evidence, hard proof that Jair Bolsonaro is guilty of these crimes.
There's quite extraordinary details coming out now. What will happen next from here?
It's up to the Supreme Court to accept or reject these accusations. I don't think you'll find anyone who thinks that the Supreme Court will not accept this. And then at the point where the Supreme Court accepts this case, Bolsonaro formally becomes a defendant. He then has the chance to have a full defence. There will be, I think, a desire on the part of the court to try and get this finished by the end of the year, not to go into 2026, which is election year. Bolsonaro's defence, I think, will certainly try and spin it out for as long as possible. So that's the situation as it is at the moment. He's not yet formally a defendant. He will become a defendant at the time that the Supreme Court accepts these accusations.
Very briefly, how's Bolsonaro reacted to these charges?
He hasn't spoken since, but he was in Congress earlier today trying to drum up support for an amnesty for those involved in those riots in Brasilia on the 8th of January. That amnesty would now seem less likely because there's going to be a drip of news about the coup attempt. And also, I think the far right in Brazil, they're quite quiet at the moment because they put so much faith in Argentina's President Javier Milei. And after this extraordinary alleged involvement in a pump and dump scheme, Brazil's far right for the moment are keeping quite quiet. They will be back alleging that Bolsonaro is a victim of political persecution.
بدخل الجيش الإسرائيلي أول حاجة بيعملها اللي هو هدم البنية التحتية وترهيب الأطفال، ترهيب الكبار، ترهيب الناس العجز، تخويفهم. الجيش الإسرائيلي لما بدخل على البيت ما بيطلب الإذن، بحط اللغم أو المتفجرات على الباب وبفجرها بحيث إنه أي إنسان بيحصل معاه شو ما يحصل برا الباب ما بيسأل عنه.
What is happening in the camps is similar to what's happening in Gaza, but the people here have no choices. They will go back to their houses. They will go back unless they remove the house. And we are expecting some things more than what we see now on the TV. Maybe we don't know what are they planning, but the camps are suffering.
For this family, these four walls in Beirut keep them safe from the elements and are a place to lay their heads at night. But it's not a home.
In February, my family moved to Beirut. I stayed in Mays Al Jabal until September 19th. When the war started to get bigger, all the people left the village, including me. If someone has to leave his house, it's something so big and not good. It hurts your heart.
When the ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel first expired on January 26th, there was hope they would return. But instead, it was extended, and Israeli forces remained inside Mays Al Jabal. The extension of the agreement now expires Tuesday, but there's little understanding of what will happen or what it will mean for residents of South Lebanon.
We can't have hope with this enemy. This enemy is a betrayer, abnormal, and hysteric. It's possible they will play with us tomorrow, but we have hope that we will return.
Dozens of Lebanese have been injured and killed in the last 3 weeks as they attempted to make their way home, despite the presence of Israeli forces who remain because they say Hezbollah forces still remain active in southern Lebanon in violation of the agreement. The Israelis have used the same logic to continue striking targets across the country, strikes that some say will continue, no matter if a withdrawal happens Tuesday.
It has been clear that while Israel might eventually withdraw, it will keep 5 observation posts and will have the ability to strike at will, which will make Lebanon's problem ongoing, because as long as the Lebanese authorities, through the Lebanese army, do not deploy in Litani and on our eastern border with Syria, nothing will change.
What ultimately happens on Tuesday will have far-reaching implications. It will be, in part, a test for a hardline American administration, as well as for the newly elected Lebanese president. But for residents of South Lebanon, Tuesday has little to do with anything other than finally being able to return home in peace. Priyanka Devani, TRT World, Beirut, Lebanon.
יום מטלטל, יום של יגון. אנחנו מחזירים הביתה 4 מחטופינו האהובים, חללים. אנחנו מחבקים את המשפחות, והלב של אומה שלמה נקרא. הלב שלי נקרא, גם שלכם. וצריך שהלב של כל העולם יקרא. כי פה רואים מול מי יש לנו עסק, עם מה יש לנו עסק, עם איזה מפלצות. אנחנו עוד אוהבים, אנחנו כואבים, אבל אנחנו גם נחושים להבטיח שדבר כזה לא יקרה יותר.
President Donald Trump signed an executive order meant to make in vitro fertilization more accessible and affordable for couples struggling with infertility.
Fertilization, I've been saying that we're going to do what we have to do, and I think the women and families, husbands, are very appreciative of it.
On the campaign trail, Trump advocated for universal coverage of the treatment, which is prohibitively expensive, often costing tens of thousands of dollars per cycle. Many women require multiple rounds. Trump has been under intense criticism from Democrats after his Supreme Court nominees helped to overturn Roe v. Wade in 2022, ending the constitutional right to an abortion in the country. This led to a wave of restrictions in Republican-led states, including some that have threatened access to IVF by trying to define life as beginning at conception. IVF involves retrieving a woman's eggs and combining them with a man's sperm in a lab. When fertilized, the embryos are placed in the uterus, and healthy embryos that are not transferred can be frozen and stored for potential future pregnancies. The procedure relies on the creation of multiple embryos, some of which may be destroyed. IVF is done in cycles, and more than one may be required, with no guarantee of success. The president of the National Infertility Association described the White House's announcement as extremely promising.
President Trump has signed an executive order meant to give him more control over regulatory government agencies. He's requiring them to send the White House any regulation proposals to be reviewed. The order also says these agencies cannot spend money on anything that doesn't align with the administration. Let's connect now with CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who is following all of this for us from West Palm Beach this morning. Nancy, part of the executive order Trump signed says agencies must follow how the president and attorney general interpret the law. Help us understand what that means.
What it means, Errol, is that often various government agencies and departments, as laws come in, they will interpret those laws and incorporate them into their programs and policies. And what this executive order is now saying is that actually, no, those decisions all get made by the Office of the Presidency itself, by the President of the United States. So it's another effort to concentrate power not in various departments of the government, but actually at the White House itself. And the executive order even goes a step farther, Errol, and says that this even applies to quasi-independent government agencies like the Federal Communications Commission or the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Election Commission, that have long had some autonomy from the White House, and in fact were created that way. What this executive order is now saying is that they've got to run their interpretations of the law by the White House as well, and that their funding could be impacted if the White House determines that they are making decisions without White House input.
And Nancy, one of the more remarkable comments from President Trump was on the war in Ukraine that aired yesterday. President Trump said Ukraine, quote, should have ended it after 3 years. You should have never started it. What does that tell us about how the president views Russia's invasion?
Well, it would appear, Errol, that at every turn, when he is asked about this invasion, he tends to find fault not with the Russians who invaded, but fault by the Ukrainians who were invaded. Not only did he say yesterday that the Ukrainians never should have started this war, which is obviously patently false, but he also accused the president of Ukraine of dragging his heels on cutting a deal, and he said that President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has an approval rating that is now at 4%, which is not true. Zelensky's approval rating is at about 50%, similar to President Trump's approval rating here in the United States. He also criticized Zelensky for imposing martial law, suggesting that that's undemocratic, again, without acknowledging that the reason that martial law has been imposed in Ukraine is because it was invaded by its much larger and more powerful neighbor. And this is really, it really goes beyond semantics, Errol, because what it indicates to the Ukrainians and what they worry about is the fact that as the president moves quite quickly to begin negotiations with Russia over ending this war, they fear that he is going to conduct those negotiations on Russia's terms and not on theirs.
Really interesting. Nancy Cordes.
Nearly 1 month into his second term, today President Trump is moving ahead with his agenda, signing new executive orders. From coast to coast and north to south, recently fired federal workers and other protesters are condemning DOJ's actions as an overreach of power. People gathered outside of a federal building in Chicago today.
It's not federal workers who are your enemy. It is people who put profits over workers.
And in Austin on President's Day.
I think they're calling programs that they don't like fraudulent, and they're not fraudulent, they just don't like them.
Those protesting Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency are pushing back against DOJ's sweeping cuts to the workforce and the potential access it's gaining along the way. The Social Security Administration's top official resigned, clashing with DOJ employees over access to records that include the earnings, benefits, even medical records of millions of Americans. The White House says DOJ's moves are to make good on Trump's campaign promise of slashing government spending.
When you look at some of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's being uncovered by DOJ, they're finding levels of fraud and waste and abuse like I think nobody ever thought possible.
It's unclear what DOJ has found at the Social Security Administration and what its employees ultimately got access to. Several lawsuits are challenging DOJ's actions, and among the questions the courts will answer, what authority does Musk have? The White House says Musk has no formal authority over government decisions, though Trump has widely regarded him as DOJ's leader. Christiane Cordero, ABC News. Washington.
President Donald Trump defending the mass firings of government workers, including hundreds from the National Nuclear Security Administration. Meanwhile, he falsely claims that Ukraine started the war with Russia. Eyewitness News reporter Jory Rand in studio now with more of an overview of Trump's latest actions. Jory.
Yeah, Mark, this president has always had a, let's say, spotty relationship with the truth. But this one today left people in America, all over Europe, and of course in Ukraine aghast, especially because the president said it was Russia continuing its murder campaign in Ukraine, said it was Ukraine's fault, and it was Trump himself now who was blocking Ukraine from the negotiations.
Tonight, as President Trump continues to cause chaos throughout the government, he's now working with Russia to end their war against Ukraine. Trump sending 3 envoys to Saudi Arabia to negotiate directly with the Russians.
We couldn't have imagined a better result after this session.
Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one.
But Trump leaving Ukraine out of the negotiations and today blaming them for starting the war by not handing over their land before Russia invaded.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
This is considered a major win for the Kremlin after they've been isolated from the West diplomatically and financially. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov already taking a victory lap, saying the U.S. is finally starting to listen to Moscow. European leaders in a panic holding an emergency summit to discuss their next moves. The French Prime Minister saying today we are witnessing an unthinkable alliance between Putin and Trump that is marginalizing Europe on its own soil. Back in the U.S., Trump continuing his purge of the federal workforce, leaving tens of thousands of Americans unemployed, including 700 at the CDC, amidst our nation's bird flu outbreak.
There's a lot of hardworking, dedicated people in that building that do incredibly important things for public health, and we're going to miss them if they're gone.
And now, for at least the second time, the Trump administration forced to try to hire back employees, figuring out their jobs were vital only after firing them.
Some of these workers focused on nuclear weapon security were immediately rehired. Do you have any concerns about how these terminations have
No, not at all. I think we have to just do what we have to do.
So among those being hired back, as you heard, folks from a nuclear security force after Trump officials realized that they protect our nuclear weapons, as well as USDA employees working on the bird flu. There's been a problem reaching some of those because when they were fired, their access to email was shut off. ABC News also reporting tonight 10% of the workforce at NASA has been fired, and it appears the IRS is next. Cuts expected there as soon as tomorrow. Jory Rand, ABC 7 Eyewitness.
Right now at noon, President Trump arriving here in South Florida, landing at Miami International Airport earlier today.
It comes as Ukraine's president criticized him, saying that he is repeating disinformation from Russia. Breaking right now at noon, President Trump reacting to these claims while here in town.
And Local 10's Glenna Milberg is live for us. She's in Doral with that reaction just coming into our newsroom. Glenna, what did he have to say?
Well, the president has been in South Florida for about 6 days. He landed here this morning. He's going to play golf. He's in South Florida, though, for a speaking engagement. But about an hour ago, what you are referencing, he's actually posting, I guess, before he's playing golf, really laying out Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And we have video of that post on X that the president posted just around 11, essentially calling Zelensky this is a quote, a modestly successful comedian, belittling him in a pretty long post like that, calling him a dictator without elections, and making other accusations, much of which, if not most of which, has very little basis in fact. And so what he's doing essentially is responding to President Zelensky's defiance yesterday in wanting to be part of whatever negotiations there may or not be to ending the war with Russia. And so now we know that this post and his outpouring preceded, I guess, his round of golf today at Doral. Air Force One president emerged after 9 a.m. at MIA and was back at Trump Doral before 10 this morning. A little midweek R&R on his golf course. Its fence line surrounded by Secret Service, and in a few hours, a speech for a global investment forum hosted by the Saudis' Sovereign Wealth Fund on Miami Beach, while his other global events drive the headlines.
Both Russia and Ukraine, they're losing thousands and thousands of soldiers, and a lot of people have been killed.
President Trump's comments Tuesday blaming Ukraine for the war that started with Russia's invasion. His moves to end it via a deal with Vladimir Putin had Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accusing him of living in a Russian-made disinformation space.
First of all, do you give
The president appeared with Elon Musk Tuesday night, allowing his Doge appointee to defend mass government layoffs.
All we're really trying to do here is restore the will of the people.
This morning, ABC is reporting many firings are being reversed as mistakes at Department of Agriculture responding to the bird flu outbreak, at the Nuclear Security Administration responsible for managing the nuclear stockpile.
In some cases, they'll fire people and then they'll put some people back, not all of them, because a lot of people were let go.
All right, so what we now know since all of these morning activities is that the president is actually not only playing golf, but on social media instead of in front of cameras, as he has been, still posting about things going on today and global affairs. We do see a lot of Secret Service here in Doral ringing the golf course. Of course, remember back to the summer when a round of golf in Palm Beach, when he was golfing with Steve Witkoff, the assassination attempt there. So it really does look, from visuals anyway, that the security is much more ramped up here at Doral around the golf course than it typically is when we've seen President Trump here in the past. I'm Glenna Milberg.
It was a stunning claim from U.S. President Donald Trump that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was responsible for Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine almost 3 years ago.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Trump's comments came after Zelensky, visiting Turkey, chose not to come to Saudi Arabia after learning he was not invited for the first round of Ukraine peace talks between Russia and the U.S.
This Russia-American meeting in Saudi Arabia was a surprise for us, just like too many others. I don't know who will stay there, who will leave, who is going where. To be honest, I don't care.
Tuesday's meeting focused largely on the U.S. and Russia reestablishing diplomatic ties, another stunning turnaround from years of the Biden administration's isolation of Moscow.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. And there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed.
The Trump administration's Ukraine-Russia envoy is scheduled to meet with Zelensky this week in Kyiv, but President Trump also questioned Zelensky's leadership, and Trump said he probably could meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin before the end of the month. As for Russia, it called the talks with the U.S. a huge accomplishment.
The conversation was, I think, very useful. We did not just listen, but heard each other. And I have reason to believe that the American side has become more understanding of our position.
As for the war, Russia continues to demand that Ukraine not be allowed to join NATO, and that no peacekeepers should be allowed inside Ukraine. Russia has no say in either of those things, but will likely try to use them as bargaining chips. The Kremlin also has no interest in giving up Ukrainian territory that it has seized. When asked what concessions Russia would be willing to make, a Russian delegation member told NBC News it's too early to tell. Andy Roschen, TRT World, Washington.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's not humorous. The president does these sorts of things. Goes off on wild tangents and says things that are clearly false. What is really hurtful about this the most is with the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people that we know has taken place. Thousands have died defending their country, and for the president to argue that they were somehow the aggressor in this action is disgraceful.
I think President Trump, on behalf of the American people, is trying to negotiate a peace between Russia and Ukraine. He talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. He said he wanted to bring peace. The war's gone on long enough, and I think he's going to deliver on that. So how we get there, I trust President Trump. He's a master negotiator, and I think he's going to get to a lasting peace.
Here's where I disagree with the White House. To the extent that the White House said that Ukraine started the war, I disagree. I think Vladimir Putin started the war. I also believe, through bitter experience, that Vladimir Putin is a gangster. He's a gangster with a black heart. I don't. He makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like Mother Teresa. He has Stalin's taste for blood.
I can't tell what this administration is planning. I will tell you this, Vladimir Putin is a thug and a dictator. He invaded Ukraine. He'll look for another target if he ends up keeping territory from this one.
1 million people have died. And thankfully, we have a president with the guts to stand up on the world stage and try to end this thing. That's what I support.
I don't want to get between President Zelensky and President Trump. I never get between a dog and a fire hydrant, man. That's the way I live my life. I think they're both good men. I think they both want the same thing. And I think we will get there.
Он изменил же свою позицию. Он сказал, да, потребуется полгода. Ну, сейчас не будем говорить о сроках, но это естественно, кстати сказать, абсолютно естественно. Здесь ничего особенного нет. Просто он начал получать информацию, объективную информацию. И эта информация, ну, как бы изменила его подход. Поэтому нужно какое-то время. Сколько потребуется времени, я сейчас не готов ответить. Но у нас есть желание провести такую встречу, и я бы хотел эту встречу провести. Но, повторяю еще раз, нужно ее подготовить с тем, чтобы был результат. Я оцениваю их высоко. Результат есть. Первое, о чем бы хотел сказать, это о том, что мы договорились возобновить в нормальном режиме работу дипломатических ведомств.
So our latest Reuters Ipsos poll shows 44% of Americans approving of Donald Trump's
job performance in his first weeks in office. That's down marginally from our findings in the past month, but doesn't show really significant change. What we have seen is a little bit of hardening on the other side of the ledger. The percentage of Americans who disapprove of his job performance is up to 51%, and that's a 10 percentage point increase over the past month, past few weeks. And what that suggests is people who maybe early on thought, well, this is the new president, let's give him the benefit of the doubt for a little while, are starting to form opinions, and those opinions may be negative. As we know, Trump campaigned, really focused on the economy, really focused on fighting inflation. That was a major part of his promise. And our polling is showing that Americans are worried about the economy. Overall, the portion of respondents who approve of Trump's stewardship of the economy is 39%. That's down marginally from 43% last month. But the share of Americans who think that the economy is on the wrong track rose to 53%. That's a 10 percentage point rise from January. And that does show that economic worries are there. They're not going away, and they may be starting to take a toll on Trump.